out of it?
I heard something happened and I was in my office and I was home alone. So I just continued doing my meetings. And I
You're all,
got to that.
everybody's here. But you have to, but you have to look at me.
Maybe I dial in it.
Yeah.
So,
What's the question?
Howard.
Howard.
So when it comes to being able to hear Banwell in the future, like for, if we're on Zoom with them for public meetings, are they, this isn't public, but I know we had the problem on Zoom where like they're calling in on one phone and then we see them on another phone. So when they're talking, the only icon that's coming up, we're not seeing like them talking.
Gotcha.
I
We're
think that
seeing-
got corrected last month though.
Did it
because when
last
I
month?
replayed the
Okay.
meeting that you ran,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Sorry. I was like downstairs, I'm looking like, where are we?
Yeah, right.
I was expecting the monster. I love your little swim vest, that's cute. Give me 2 seconds.
Like you
Sorry,
should.
No, you're
everyone.
fine. We just.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Lisa has.
Welcome to my
graciously,
world, Brian. You want
said-
to take
said
minutes?
Yes to taking
So-
minutes, so.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm not knitting, so
Would
there's
you
that.
kindness Tonight, please.
If you could do both, that'd be impressive.
That would be pretty awesome. Alright, well, maybe this will come on, maybe it won't. Who's charging it? Oh, there we go.
So Adam, how does
Thank
this
you.
work?
You're
You
gonna
said it would be
This is your
recorded
Anna's
so that
file.
the public can
This
see.
is your
Mhm.
project tree meeting note.
We're not streaming. Would you like me to stream it? I can if you'd like.
I don't, well, I just, would just, this is just a question that I had. Well, how does it work? And it's-
Shannon's getting you the Clark Wilkins.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So,
I didn't, there was.
Because
a
of
lot
that,
I
I'll
didn't-
probably turn it around so that all of you are being recorded.
Where is that? Oh, that's Banwell.
That's,
That's this right behind me too.
and kind of speak up, I guess, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't be too bad. Yeah.
Good.
Ingrid, can you guys hear us okay?
We can you hear us?
Not very well at all, but might be the,
That seems like it's you.
How's this?
keep talking if you don't mind.
No problem. So it's raining out today.
Great, we can hear you now.
Great.
It's over there.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, super. Well, hello, everyone. It is 6:02, July 8th, 2021. Lisa Eastland will take our minutes tonight, and I'll call this meeting of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee to order. Before we dig into the agenda, just a few administrative housekeeping notes. We haven't met in person since February 2020.
Wow.
So thank you all for being here, and it's a really exciting night. Welcome and thank you. So just a reminder that we are an appointed committee of the SAU School Board. And as such, we will continue posting our agendas and our meeting minutes. I really aim to have a quorum at every meeting. We're required to have a quorum at any meeting where we're taking a vote on any of the recommendations that we'll be making to the board. So tonight it's all discussion. But I think whenever we can have a full membership present, that will only help us at those meetings when we do have to make an informed vote on a recommendation. So with that being said, our first order of business tonight is the approval of, actually first, I wanted to also welcome Laura Taylor to the committee with the change in the organizational, at the organizational meeting of the boards, we now have new representation from Shawinigan. So Laura is here, so welcome Laura. And we have Tom still here representing ASB, but as the chair, and Victoria is still vice chair of this committee, but also now representing the Amherst School Board. So, okay, that out of the way, if I could get a motion to approve the June meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Any discussion? I do have one note for the minutes. I was not at that meeting and my name was listed, so we'll just want to get that updated. Okay. All in favor?
So is
Abstain.
she making the motion to approve the amended minutes?
Yes, right, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Good, good catch.
Okay.
You're gonna get this job. permanently.
No. I can tell you that right now. No.
Okay, so I was abstained because I wasn't there.
Who seconded?
Say, nobody seconded yet.
We need a second. Was anybody there? Was I
Need
at that
somebody
meeting?
from that meeting to be second.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
I don't think I
you
was
weren't
there.
there.
Who has the
Okay,
minutes?
so we'll
Okay,
table- yeah.
table June minutes. Okay.
Yep. Okay. That out of the way, we'll move on to the facility project committee update. We're just gonna blow through these subcommittee updates real quick so that we can get on with the update from Banwell tonight. So from the facility project committee, Amy, could you give a quick update on the CM timeline since Roger's not here?
Yes, so we had moved forward with the construction manager RFP process. And following that, had a conversation with USDA. And they recommended that we put that process on hold for a couple of reasons. They wanted us to have the updated designs in the RFP as opposed to using the previous designs that everybody had done. So, and we were close to getting those, so that wasn't gonna slow that up too much. They also wanted us to make sure that we met their requirements of free and open competition. So we will be expanding our outreach in terms of posting the RFP, so looking at some wider publications to cast a wider net. So unfortunately, that did put our process on hold. We had already gone out and we had 3 candidates and Roger had done a walkthrough. So we're on hold now until we can get the design to a point where we're ready to include that in the RFP and then go back out. So it is going to put us on hold for a bit. So unfortunately, that is in the advantages of using USDA, taking advantage of federal funds and locking the rate in early and at a potentially very low rate. The downside of that is we have federal requirements that we have to.
That's the way it rolls.
Yeah.
No such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, and then you have a meeting upcoming, right? Just to-
Yes, and we have a meeting on Monday with Banwell. They're actually coming down here. Thank you. And we're meeting with reps from USDA and their architect to actually talk through this process. The application, the financing application requires cost estimates. So a lot of that we can't do until we get the CM in place. So we're sort of in a catch-22. So Brad had some really good advice to have architect to architect talk and go talk through the process and the order of things so that we can move forward as fast as possible. So we have a meeting set up on Monday.
Great.
Talk through that.
And then
Hey,
also
Amy,
on.
Yeah,
Could I just say something?
yes.
We're getting a little feedback here, but I think this is a blessing in disguise because what this is going to allow us to do is that we are going to hopefully show you our concept designs tonight. And then in this revised RFP process, we're going to be asking for the construction managers to give us a conceptual estimate. So we'll get a preview of the estimate in a competitive environment. So I think it's going to be good.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Where's the meeting gonna be held and what time?
The meeting is. So we have a Zoom meeting with USDA. Yes.
And then there far as just some questions, still looking at the wetlands.
Yeah, so the meeting's at 12:30. And then, yeah, and then Adam has scheduled, a meeting with one of the selectmen, at 2:00.
Chair of the select board, I believe. And I don't know, John, if you're included in that as well, or if they've talked to you as well, but really with some zoning folks. We're trying to make a connection to the zoning board to get ahead of the wetlands issue.
So if you're looking at that on the conceptuals tonight, you may kind of make note of that, but that's being addressed.
So it's
Maybe
good
where's that meeting now?
I believe,
So we can,
no, USDA meeting, or, yeah, the USDA meeting is Zoom. But you can come in here if you want.
okay.
Yeah, if you want to connect with me after. And it's good that we're having these meetings on Monday because there's an Amherst board meeting on Wednesday, so we'll have some additional information to update the board.
With the wetlands, we also want to talk to the Conservation Commission as well as the planning board. So,
The idea Monday is find out everyone we need to talk to so that we can be ahead of it as opposed to behind it. That's the purpose of the meeting.
That's what I'm about that. You're within public buffer zone, wetlands.
Correct. The 100-foot setback, one of the conceptual designs is what I'm going to call slightly within the 100-foot setback.
So you can ask for a waiver on that?
In my perspective, my advice to this committee is we talk to everyone who's involved in that decision-making process and follow their advice about which process to take, whether it's a waiver. Schools are a little different in that we're not subject to local zoning ordinance, but wetlands, there's exemptions for wetlands. So we're going to meet with folks Monday and map out what process ought we to take to deal with this issue.
When the conceptuals come up in a few minutes, you'll see that the current portables are actually more into the area that we're talking about
Yeah,
than the actual new building is being suggested. So I think it will make a lot more, it will make a lot more sense, I think, when you see that on the screen. if
The
you
new
haven't
building
seen it.
will fix some of the.
It-
current
yeah.
conditions.
It will,
Yeah.
it will.
I think
feels more like
temporary
just the
always
other
has a little
conversation,
different
but-
designation, so.
Exactly,
You
exactly.
can do a lot of these guys are temporary.
Yeah,
Yes, yes, those portables are not temporary.
I would not call them temporary anymore, but
I feel like
maybe
they
at the time.
are.
So that really probably encompasses the finance committee subcommittee update as well, right? Do you have any
Yeah,
other-
yeah, we have the application documents that are required, but as I said, most of them, really, we need the cost estimates to be able to do it.
Great, thank you. From the PR subcommittee, we've sort of put a pin in our weekly meetings for now because we want the updated conceptuals and really kind of all of that in place before we move forward. However, we did have a group at the polls on voting day with a table, just again, sharing with folks the website and that we're meeting and stay tuned and that this is upcoming. So that was successful. A big thanks to Lisa and Ellen and Brian. I think you were there for a little bit, right? And Josh Conklin.
my daughter hustled quite a bit.
She
There you
did.
go.
She was fire.
Yeah, so we have some good outreach there, and we'll have some more videos up and coming as we move forward. Do you have anything else on this? Okay, great. So without further ado, Ingrid and Brad, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight, and we're looking forward to seeing everything that you have to share with us.
Sounds good.
I think Adam has it set up where you can maybe share your screen.
Okay. Pulling it up now. So hopefully next time you have a meeting, we'll be down there with you.
That would be great. We would love that.
Can you see our screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. So we have, we've been working weekly with all of the administration, the principals, having multiple meetings. And we have two options for the elementary school to show you tonight. Is this big enough for you? Can you guys see this?
If you could if it's possible to make it bigger, it wouldn't hurt, but we have hard copies too. We have that one,
No.
not of this one. Okay.
Perfect. So
Okay.
just generally disregard for the moment the site design and layout. We really haven't worked on that yet. We're in the process of getting a civil engineer on board, and we've just done this as kind of more of a placeholder. So we have two options for the elementary school to show you tonight. This is the first option, which we called kind of the plateau option, where again, both options that we're going to show you tonight only have 2 stories from the ground. This particular option has the administration and media in the front, and then the cafeteria and the gym on the back side, and then the classroom wings are up on the hill. We have not a loop road, but a road around the side of the building that can access the field that's in back. We also have the access road that goes around the field, up the hill to the plateau and the parking above. So we've talked a little bit about that could be parent drop-off, and the bus drop-off could be up on the plateau, or vice versa, but that remains to be decided at this point. So in this option, phasing, we could build all of the classrooms and the bulk of the gym and the cafeteria, and what would be second phase, if you will, would be the administration and media room. So everything could be done, and the 5th grade could come down to this while we're renovating the 2nd or 3rd phase of the middle school. I want to go upstairs. Any questions on this plan before I go up? Okay. Again, we are showing this 100-foot setback. That's that red dash line there. So we would have to obviously either tweak the field or get a variance or some sort of whatever they're recommending for us to put roads in there as well. It's not just buildings, it's any sort of impervious area. So we'd want to kind of tweak what we're doing there. Maybe the loop road actually goes around the other side of the field and up. But that, after our meeting on Monday, we can take a closer look at that piece. So up on the plateau, we have what we call the grade wings. We've added a satellite nurse and a satellite administration area, which is shown in the orange. And then the 1st grade, kindergarten, and preschool would all be on that main level, which is on grade. And the preschool would have a separate kind of parking and drop-off area at the front. And again, the road probably wouldn't be that far away. We'd bring it closer in and design the playground, so don't really pay attention to that right now. We have a teacher room up here, book room, and then the Tel Data Electric, kind of a utility section, which doesn't need windows in the core area there. One of the things that we talked about that we haven't modified in the plan right now is having 2 stairs down to that 1st floor level where all the core elements are. So we would add in a stair where the books are and just nudge that whole kind of wing down to add in that 2nd stair so that it alleviates the pressure and is better security-wise. And then upstairs on the 2nd floor is the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. Some sped area, again, nurse and teacher and Tel Data. And obviously the restrooms would be in there too. So pretty simple. This would be a pretty complex foundation because we'd be building into the hill. Phasing wise, it works very well. And I think we saw this or a version of this at the last meeting. So do you want to ask questions here? Or do you want me to go through the second options before we get into?
Why don't we pause for questions here? I think that makes sense. So does anyone have any questions about this option?
Well, that plan is totally different from what we've got from the draft.
Yes, that's, it will be a different plan too.
That's the next plan year.
So when can we get one of these?
You know what, I've seen this, so is there a copy room in here? Because I have a set in my bag.
So you're gonna have, basically, you have the upper field, which is already elevated above the rest of the grade in the area, and then you put a two-story building on top of that? Okay,
That's the design.
it's just gonna, I mean, aesthetically, it's gonna probably have more character, people are always gonna see that, more so than they would have. If you're a two-story building, was set, because that grade goes up quite a bit, probably like almost 20 feet.
Yeah, those are twos on the plan, so I think it's at least 16 feet.
So I've already seen this plan and asked a lot of questions about it. So I can ask those questions in front of you all to get those questions rolling, or wait a second for other people to have those questions. Christine?
So we're talking Upperfield now.
You are, so in
We've
this,
done all the geologic stuff and it's okay to build there,
Correct.
the water, the grant that we got about the watershed and
That would still be an issue to address.
Oh, okay.
So that would be one of the, kind of not necessarily a but it would be one of the things with this plan that we would have to overcome is
Okay.
the upper field at Wilkins was, built using a grant from the Land Water Conservation Fund, which says that if you're going to then use that field for another purpose other than a field, you have to replace it in town somewhere of equal size. So that would be a hurdle.
Is there a reason we're going there instead of staying where we are now?
Well, the second option is staying
Okay.
staying where we are. So this was just kind of trying to reinvent and not reinvent, but really look at another option to efficiently use space and square footage. And we do have that hill there that's sort of, nothing's happening with it. So,
Where the stairs are even going. up?
right, yeah, so this would kind of be building into that and utilizing that a little bit, I think was the idea.
Tom,
So would there be elevators between the lower section and the hospital?
And the building has an elevator. Yeah.
Yes, there definitely would need to be, yes.
What would we do with the rest? It looks like, is the parking in the top part, out in front of the two wings, or is the parking gonna be down below where the building is currently now?
Both. We'd have parking in both locations. That's another downside with this is that, until people kind of learn the building, you kind of need two entrances, if you will. So, security wise, that's not great either.
Because there's also a lot of impervious area, I mean, we've really a lot of impervious area,
Yes,
almost, looks like it's double.
yes.
This shows kind of worst case because the previous versions that were done before us were 3 stories. This is a 2-story classroom wing up on top there to try to keep the scale of the building down in this kind of residential area. We didn't feel that on top of the plateau, having a 3-story structure would be sensitive enough.
Well, in theory, you do have 3 stories.
Sure.
you do.
It's just bifurcated with a single story on the front end and a 2-story up in the upper field, so it's still.
Correct, yeah.
The reality is probably more than 3 stories because your gym is more than just a regular single story. Your gym is essentially a double story. So you're really looking at almost a 4-story building by the time you get 2 up top and then the gym with the extended ceiling down below.
So the gym will still be lower. but
The
Yeah.
gym will still be lower than the classroom.
But you're right, it's still.
Yeah. So it's essentially, it's 4 stories.
So is the intent the fields in the back now will be used by the town to offset the fields that we're taking?
Yes, and a new field down in the front,
Okay.
on top of the existing building footprint.
We could also fit a field down in here. I think, this parking area would be closer to the building. So we could easily fit a field of this size down in here if that's preferred to. Because I know this is a fairly wet area in here, so.
I think Laura.
So I'm just wondering, the house is so close to the lines there. Would you buying that house or?
No,
So there's a question, Ingrid and Brad, about the house, that's the one on Jones Road, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, so that house on Jones Road and that upper field, if that's encroaching on their land in a way that we would need to purchase it from them or anything.
No, you're far enough away from the buffer that wouldn't, you don't need any waiver or anything like that.
You're barely off the playing surface that's there now. There's woods, and then you can't see that house most days from on that field or from Jones Road, so I think you have enough protection there.
That homeowner is probably not going to like it.
Correct.
And this is definitely gonna change Jones Road to the way, right? Like that's another,
Change traffic flows and.
yeah, right.
This structure is gonna be visible. I mean, I can't imagine this is gonna be, this is like a regular house building. You're looking at a very large building that
Right.
they're gonna see in the backyard.
If you remember when those, with the bridge at the base of Mac Hill was shut down, this was a pass through. And those residents hated that. There's just that guy that was signed. used to count.
789 days.
So
Yeah,
They
no,
won't be thrilled.
I don't think we should ignore or underestimate the impact that this would have to those folks, right?
The concept would be that either the cars and buses will be separated.
Yep.
And so likely, if I'm a homeowner, I prefer the buses because there's a lot less of them.
That's correct.
Right,
And it's only twice a day.
correct.
During
That's
the
still,
school year.
that's still a consideration. And the other factor just to remember is if we build a new school here, at some point, we're gonna have to go through the state fire marshal's office for approval.
Mhm.
And every school site's gotta have a secondary egress. And technically, we have one right now, but I don't think it's gonna pass muster when we go back, if we go back through, just my opinion. So right now, our secondary egress is right here because it's technically on a separate road. But if you think about it, it's really not. And so the state fire marshal, in my experience, Ingrid, weigh in here, but my experience is very strict about ensuring that, and they rely on the AHJ as well, but, so just remember, we're gonna have to tie to Jones Road somehow, in my opinion, or at least be, worst case scenario, be prepared for that.
Only in this option, or either option.
I think in both options is gonna need to be, either the egress has gotta come from Jones Road, or somehow we gotta get further up. And we really can't, because we're on the edge of our property.
And they just sold that property.
So I think Jones Road is going to have to be accessed. If, it doesn't have to be an actual open to the public, it has to be something that fire
Be
department. can
gated,
access.
it can
Correct.
be, yeah.
You
so
can gate and lock it and all that, and you give the fire department a key, but just keep in mind.
What about if you move the building down and put the road alongside to give more barrier with the abutting house?
I think that's what this next option is going to demonstrate.
I think that's a fair point, John. Like if, so, Ingrid, you're not gonna be able to see this, and I apologize, but if you're driving a road up on what I'll call the right-hand side of the facility, that's not gonna be easy to put in. If you were to shift the building from left to right and create a road up this way,
Oh, this
That's what I'm
option,
just saying.
creates a, yeah, that's what I'm saying. John.
Yeah,
And it creates a bigger buffer with that resident.
Yes, that's what I just said.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, it'd be easier to phase as well. I mean, we were trying to leave as much future expansion on the classroom wings up above that we can before you kind of start going down that hill on the right, on the top. But yeah, we could definitely look at shifting that building to the right.
From a PR perspective too, I think the people that live up on Jones Road, I mean, they get a ton of field traffic. And parked cars all along the road, whereas if you now have parking there and you move the fields away from them to dead spots really where there's no residents, I think that's an optimal
it's
situation.
true,
for
the
people.
parking for the fields would probably shift down. the
Shift down to the
Road.
bottom and all the parking that you normally get from all the different sporting events. The fields shift down, so you get all the noise that comes from that, and plus the traffic. I think that's a benefit to the residents.
I'm confused. So Brian, you're
You turn
suggesting
it
move
off
the
if you
left
want.
flank and changing that angle and moving the left flank further to the
So
right?
instead of having this road that wraps around.
Yeah.
I mean, first you're cutting through wetlands, which is gonna be tough to get through.
Right,
Then you have to traverse up that hill. If you were to shift the building from left to right, and instead of having this road wrap around, you have the road that cuts up through here. So you don't have to have this big wraparound for the fields. There's no benefit to having a road around the fields.
so
You need
you're
to be able to
saying
access
move
You just
the
need
whole
access out
thing.
Jones Road.
So just move the whole V up
Move the
top.
whole line
V
up
down.
top this way.
I see. So, yeah, okay.
In all honesty, the fire marshal's probably gonna require that anyway, because they're gonna want a fire truck to get behind that building.
On both sides. So even if we slide it over on the right, we're still gonna need some type of access on the right side.
Even if it's like crushed gravel or something that's hard packed, that fire truck can drive on, it
Right.
just has to be accessible. That's
So
a great point.
I think this is an interesting conversation because when I've seen these slides, the things that you guys have brought up were not the things that I brought up. I felt much more strongly that we should not be moving over to Jones Road. I think that it's really going to be a change and a hard sell to that neighborhood and to those people who are used to that road. I hadn't thought about the field traffic and now the field traffic being shifted. So when I was looking at it through that optic, an issue that I see with it is having your administration suite downstairs away from your classrooms and splitting where you have your pickups by 3 levels seems like a far stretch for me, for the administration. Doesn't mean that we can't do things differently. It just means that it's gonna be something to think about. And then I guess my question is, it just becomes, are we as a committee prepared to bring something to a board that says, hey, we're gonna change Jones Road? Like, because that's the reality of it. Now, I know that we've done, as a town, we've done a lot of talk on the traffic pattern through Boston Post Road. And maybe it's worth looking into and making that connection with town to say, is this actually better for the traffic that's happening on Boston Post? Where we know that that road is being maxed out at some point. And there's a possibility of needing to talk about that further, I guess.
If you use Jones Road just for bus traffic, right now you're limiting the number of vehicles passing through there. If you open up the lower level for all the auxiliary traffic, which is the volume that most people are frustrated by, that gives you a lot more parking space to facilitate vehicles through, gets them off 122, and gets them inside the envelope of the property. And you can minimize all that bus traffic up top. Now you have people going on bus, go up top, people coming on, either pedestrian or, being picked up, go down below. That, I mean, you already have a natural segregation anyways.
Yep.
This is not promoting that you physically go this direction for this traffic route, this direction for the other.
Short of the sight lines of the building on Jones Road, you probably improve the Jones Road traffic for those residents.
Correct.
Improves the whole village traffic.
Absolutely.
Buses going by Clark, they wait there forever, and then many other people.
That's a great point too.
But you're gonna get parent traffic through the village now. But there potentially get parent traffic through the village.
You will, but look at the size of the space that you have for parking now, that you can actually bring traffic through, which is significantly larger than what they have right now, which gets people off the road.
So you're building a lot of traffic on Boston Post.
Yeah, but they're all
right
leaving
now.
at the same time, so they're gonna be going to the stop sign out here at the same time. So you're gonna, at some point, you're gonna have traffic through the village. I don't think it's going there, I think it's when it's leaving.
But they may circulate around and go over the Mac Hill way too.
Right.
You've got 2 diverse routes now, instead of all along one side.
I have to say, I'd love to see option B, because I don't love option A. When I looked for a house, I never wanted my kids on a different floor or a different part of the house than my bedroom. And I feel like this is what we're creating, and I don't like it. So I would love to see option B before we get into more details about traffic and all of those kinds of things, because I'm not loving this design.
And again, we don't have to love any of these designs
Right.
tonight. This is just taking a look at where Banwell's come to date.
Yeah.
With the designs, and this is just one of 2 that we're looking at tonight, and the next one is very different.
And I think it's, sorry, one more thing. I think it's important to note that there have been, it's not just, you'll notice that it's option A and then option C. There have been other options that have been immediately scrapped. So I think it's important for everybody to know that, a lot of work has gone into trying to figure out and work around those things that we're all talking about.
And I just want to level set a little bit. The architect's job is not to figure out the site. The architect's job is to figure out the building. And in general, have an idea for the site. A site and civil engineer is the one who's going to come in and say, you've got to move that building to the right because you've got to have a driveway behind because of the fire code. And you've got to do this because of the bus traffic. And you've got to make sure buses exit on the right side so the doors, like the site and civil engineer who really is figuring out a lot of those other issues. What we've asked of Banwell, give us an idea that's workable, but then it has to be refined as far as site. So I just want to be clear about that. These are not meant to be a finalized site designs in any way, or even conceptual. for the site.
Fair, thank you for clarifying that, Adam. But so in terms of the building, I think what I'm hearing from you, Lisa, is that you don't love the building design in that it's too, everything's kind of too separated out.
Right,
to
I
Victoria's.
don't like that the
Admin
admin is down below
Yep.
and the kids are up top.
Great. Any
So,
other?
I'm anxious to
building
see the other
feedback?
one.
I'm just curious to pick on that because I'm not in a school, as far removed as possible. How much interaction is there really between the offices that are down below with the classrooms up top? I just don't know.
All the time. So the kids, it is vital that the kids know who their principals and assistant principals are. The principals come into the classrooms all the time just to talk to the kids, things like that. If there's any problems or anything like that, especially with the older kids, it's like, hey, I'm sending so-and-so down to the office. And then the kids go on their own. So
Does it matter if down is this way to the left or this way?
I feel like it's
south?
as a parent, I would feel like that's a significant difference to have my kids up here and the people in charge of the safety and really the boss of my kids are down below. I would not be super comfortable with that. I mean, I would live with it, of course, because I don't have my kids all day. So, but ultimately, I would love to see the other option. I just think,
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
So, also, and this may not work, but this is the conceptual design phase, meaning big blocks of spaces can be rearranged.
Right.
So it's possible, like just as an example, preschool and the admin could flip floors.
Sure.
To have the admin space on one of those other classroom floors, and the preschool then becomes access from that lower level on the same floor. So unless Ingrid says it's a fatal flaw that can't be recovered from.
Right.
I would agree with you that the admin's got to be closer to the, but the question I would ask is there another massing space, Ingrid, that could be moved around to ameliorate that concern? And you don't have to answer that now,
Right.
but that's.
yeah, because all the specials could be down below or whatever. Right.
Those are exactly the type of questions to raise during this part of the process.
Okay, great. And I think your next slide kind of goes through some of those advantages and yeah.
Right. So we've touched on some of these. Again, the hillside, we're actually using it now, and it's not just, bushes and trees. We can separate the core functions like the cafeteria and gym for community use and lock down the academic part of the building. And the majority of the building is outside the existing building's footprint, so we can build a really large chunk of the building in phase one. So the disadvantages of this A option is the foundation would be complicated. It is, even though it's 2 stories technically at the top, it does feel like 3, 4 stories. The cafeteria seems a little more remote from the classrooms as well as the administration, as you pointed out. There's a smaller performance space than your current stage. Again, the 2-story academic wing looks over that residence up there, and it takes over the upper playing fields, which is a pretty big cost to replicate somewhere else when it's a pretty nice field as it is. And I'll add some of the additional negatives that we talked about tonight to this list so we can get that up. So ready for option C?
We're ready.
Yes.
Okay, so option B, just a tidbit before, we actually looked at, and with this 100-foot setback and the length of the corridors, it just didn't seem to work. So we've actually already thrown that one out, but we did take a look at it. Option C was exciting because one of the first times we came to look at your school and went into it, the multi-purpose room can be a really beautiful structure. I mean, the structure's good, it's sprinkled, you just added some storage to it. It's wood timber construction. It needs some TLC and it needs some updating in terms of finishes, but the bones and the slab and everything are great. So why not try to reuse that? And what would the school look like design? Can we do that? So that's what this option looks at. So really, we would start out building this classroom. The existing building ends right here. So we would start out building 2 stories of this classroom wing, which would fit once that is done, it would fit all of your classrooms that are in the school right now. The downside is we couldn't bring fifth grade down because we need to build the rest of the structure after your existing structure is demolished. This also creates a kind of cool loop around the building. So it's not just a long wing where you have to go walk all the way down and come back and walk down another wing. This is a really nice loop, and it creates a centralized outdoor classroom courtyard. So pre-K could be here, a flex classroom, which could service both pre-K and kindergarten, and first grade also would be down on this main level. Special ed, and then all of the specials, core functions are in this area here. So we felt that you could still utilize the kitchen and multi-purpose room and have a covered, protected walkway after this is built, while they're building the rest of this as phase 2. We would need some sort of portables for administration and
special education.
Special education. So there would be a year of utilizing some portables in this scheme. The bulk of it, we've kept an area here so we can fit a loop road around. So we can massage this a bit so that the building stays out of the 100-foot, but the road that goes around here will enter the 100-foot setback a tad. And the
Now you
next,
see like the marginal impacts of the.
Well, and you can, like you see, the portables are going with that already, right?
so on the second floor, again, we have that loop area. We have the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. And we have all of their associated spaces for special ed. We do have the satellite nurse and another teacher room up here. And then you could actually look down into the gym that's down below there. So we have 4 stairs as part of this one so that you can easily get down from any part of the building. And it's about I think it's actually a little bit shorter than your existing elementary school, the length from the very beginning to the end. So it's less of a walk on the second floor than the kids have now.
And it's worth pointing out that the approach to the school, as you approach the main entrance, you're approaching essentially a 1-story wing, which will help the scale quite a bit. Even the 1.5 story gym, as it were, is behind the 1-story portion, and you still have that gable massing of the existing multi-purpose room as your front face, your greeting face of the building.
So just to review the advantages, disadvantages of this option. So the advantages, it retains the multi-purpose room, which is, over $1 million of savings because we're not building that. It retains that beautiful stage that you have. It saves a portion of the kitchen for reuse, so we probably need to make it bigger, but at least we have, about half of it built. So there's significant cost savings from that. We have a kind of staged structure in terms of massing, as Brad was saying, where the front of the building is a little smaller and more approachable, especially for younger children. And then the 2 stories is kind of set back. We don't disturb those upper playing fields. There's good solar orientation for natural daylighting and that nice sunlit courtyard in the center. And we can still separate the core functions for community use at the entrance. In a much simpler foundation. This is a slab on grade, no retaining walls, no water issues to think about. So it's, again, that's a huge cost savings from the other option A. Some of the disadvantages, it's a smaller phase 1 than option A, so we can't bring that 5th grade down as part of the first phase. There's less area for parking or bus drop-off in the front of the school, so we're going to have to be creative about parent drop-off and bus drop-off since we don't have 2 accesses. So that's where we're at with this option. Ready for comments?
I think we're running the same problem here with trying to find that egress road up through Jones Road. You're gonna flow all the way around that back field, or you're gonna have to cut up through the upper field. So we're gonna be building that road regardless,
If required.
if required.
Again, worst case scenario, it should be in the back of our minds just in case.
So how long would this extend this type of project? Because if we can't bring fifth grade down, we can't really do much in the middle school at the same time.
It's 1 year old.
Or an extra year, which in terms, I assume increases costs as we do that.
Ingrid, that's 1 year of construction.
This would be 2 years, just like the other one. It's just the first phase would be minimal, and the second year would be a big, big push.
Yeah, we're gonna have to really, pursuing this option, we're really gonna have to take a deep dive into the middle school because, we're of the belief that the middle school, with the exception of any addition, would be a sort of a summer projects, probably for a couple of years, a phased effort. So I think the fifth grade could stay there while that's all being done, because it's not being done during the school year. It's being done when they're not there. But we have to take a closer look as to the actual room counts, just to be certain that we're satisfying the grade need while they're still in the building as it's being renovated.
Probably means fifth grade stays one extra year.
But yeah, if they're doing it during the summer, you have room to leave them there, then it's not where you're trying to build it while they're still going to school at the same time, so that makes sense.
But to your comment about increased cost, the point of going to bond for both projects at the same time is that we lock it all in, right? So that shouldn't be, or is that?
Longer, if there's a longer construction window, there's gonna be some more costs.
Some more
But
costs,
if they're saying it's 2 years for both projects either way, then we're fine.
Okay,
The impact is just that fifth grade will be 1 year later.
right.
And this also has the need for portables, which portables are more expensive than people realize.
That was my next one, is where would you put portables here, because you already have 2 that you're gonna lose, and you're putting that front field, I mean,
Front field.
you have been to plumb them and do all that stuff.
It's a couple $100,000, easy. Easy.
Can we use the portables that we currently have, like the structures?
You have enough, I mean, you're gonna have to get classrooms in there, special education space, admin space, maybe some company here admin for a little while.
I
Get 2 or 3 offices, and this was right here.
I don't
It used to be
remember,
3.
I don't remember the portables we had at AMS had bathrooms. But they were used for specials, so kids were only in there for 45 or 50 minutes at a time. So while that's going on, could just specials be in those or whatever?
Clark is, I
What
mean,
about
could Clark
Clark?
be swing space? Right, we talked about that.
If we needed to? In terms of-
I thought that too, but what they said they need it for is admin space and special education. So we can't really offload special education.
But if we needed to keep kindergarten at Clark for an extra year
Oh, that's what you're
Right.
saying.
and use
To
space in
avoid
the
portables.
building
Yeah.
to avoid
Right.
$100,000 of dollars.
Right.
You don't need to answer now, Ingrid, but I think, if Clark was available as swing space, can we be creative in trying to not have a need for portables?
Yes. Totally.
That's the right answer. It's going in the minutes.
It is.
This doesn't alleviate some of the traffic concerns that the town consistently raises. I mean, it's still there. I mean, again, the only other option you potentially have is if you do build a road, a permanent paved road up the backside of the hill to create that loop, you could drive bus traffic on the backside off of, I always forget the name of this road,
New Boston Road.
New Boston Road,
I know.
and drive that bus traffic through there, whereas the primary traffic continues to come down 122 for drop off. I mean, we don't have a huge parking lot either.
If we're,
My question on this option C, is there enough room to run the racetrack around the building for buses and emergency?
Yes, we're going to need a little variance right here to be able to do a road around.
Then that
But there's a,
would,
Well, we think there's enough clearance for the actual emergency vehicle to get around, yes.
then would that alleviate the road up to Jones?
I think the state fire marshal, if we have the loop road that goes all the way around, we would not necessarily need this road here. We would still need to keep two ways out.
Yep,
I'm just reliving bad memories in Wyndham. The Wyndham High School, we were absolutely required to put in a second road to a different road. And
That sucks, that's why, it's a huge place to get to begin with.
If we
so,
find,
so,
I just want to be prepared. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, you know, more
telling me
civil
those
service
two
plans,
entrance ways don't accommodate that?
Pardon me?
You're telling me that those two entrance ways going into the school now do not accommodate that?
I'm saying that, that my fear is that the state fire marshal will say that those two entrances are not separate enough as a secondary egress. I hope to be wrong.
I understand, I understand.
Playground, I assume in the back field there.
The playground could be right in here. The other downside that we haven't listed is the pre-K right in this conceptual option is back here. So it's not easy for parents to kind of, and it's further away from the entrance for the really little guys to walk down here. So we may look at, swapping some of these so that we could create a little parking drop off and a pre-K playground right here. We could have a playground in this little courtyard. I believe we can still have playground in the buffer areas here, and then this play field would stay here as well, and we could even have play stuff out front here.
Playground in the buffer area.
right, that's where the pine trees are.
Yeah. Gotta play over the log. So question, I
That
had
has to be.
Right, it has to. So a quick question about the design with the ability to look down into the gym. What kind of noise dampening things need to be in place? Because if I'm a fifth grade teacher and I can hear, circus day going on in the gym, that might be an issue.
I was assuming that would be a wall with actually glass, so it would be a solid wall, so there wouldn't be any acoustical, spillover.
So we're not using the multi-purpose room as a gym anymore, that they have a separate gym? The multi-purpose room?
Just be a cafeteria space.
Remember, we're adding 2 grade levels to the building, so lunches are going to take up more time in the building, so it's really not available for gym class.
So I asked regarding the size of our multipurpose room, and now that we have more kids in the same building, and we're working on understanding that we have enough space to be able to do extra kids in that same multipurpose room that we have now as a cafeteria. So that we can not have to have kids start at 10 a.m. and end at 1:30 for lunches. We can still get into like a regular, whatever our normal is, 10:30 to 12:30 or something.
And unlike our previous design, there's only 1 gym in a cafeteria, not 2 gyms in a cafeteria. So I just want that.
So what do people think about this option compared to A?
I love it. Laura's hand is up.
I kind of like keeping the, that's another reason, I think the involvement there, being immersed in having my kids in school. And as a taxpayer, I can see supporting, holding on to that history.
I agree with you. I love this design first because it does salvage the multi-purpose room, which I think anywhere we can, use things we've already paid for, that's fantastic. And I like the simplicity of this design over the other design. I think the simplicity fits the character of our community. And I think the simplicity also yields, it sounds like, and obviously we don't know, but you said it's a simpler foundation. So hopefully that yields a cost savings. We're going to get a cost savings with the multi-purpose room, being able to reuse that. So those things all appeal to me in this design over the other design.
Is it possible to get a pictorial view of this at our next meeting?
Like an elevation.
Yeah, pictorial elevation, yeah.
I think you look at it from, the elevation view, this is gonna be much more low profile. The background with that hill there is gonna be very little to see from Jones Road or the house, less impact to the neighbors. It's gonna be more aesthetic. And I think the foundation is gonna be significantly more.
Ingrid, an elevation from like,
Bird's eye, massing.
No, like,
Looking at the exterior.
Are we talking
envelope,
about like a Google Street View? Is
yes,
that
like
what we're?
from like right here and
Okay.
my cursor is. And
Gotcha.
Looking this way into
As
the,
if you're driving into it.
as you're
Like
driving
a
into
Google
it.
Street View.
Okay,
Simple
Sure,
though.
can
Don't spend 3 days in Revit for it, but
we won't.
I think that's a great, show that, because the first design is going to look like a high rise.
Yes.
It really is in the village.
I'm gonna say from a PR perspective, I think this one's a lot easier to sell.
I think it's gonna be significantly cheaper. It has to be just foundation work alone.
And the foundation work bill is gonna be
Getting into
substantial.
that hill.
Well,
Even though you don't even know what that hill is, we've been, all the geotech work that was done down at the lower level,
correct.
that hill could be anything. It can probably all fill.
It could have been a dump site for, yeah.
Like,
Let's hope it wasn't.
Well, I mean,
Let's
like
hope
for,
it wasn't, okay?
well, they flattened the Jones Road field somehow.
Yeah.
That's my point. Like there's,
Yeah.
it's probably all unsuitables that got dumped over the site.
and they're already on suitables underneath the area where the back of the building is now, and there's some suspicious, the joke for last week, and it's, there's something that is kind of like, that doesn't look quite right, so.
Plus, the first design had a lot more road and site work up, like the Jones Road site work is not cheap. That's.
That's a steep hill, so you drive a bus up that, it's gonna take some engine.
And when it's snowy and we haven't, we're doing our early release, trying to manage that, might be interesting. And I think the other part of that is it also saves money with, that we don't have to then go purchase other playing fields someplace else. So that's an additional cost savings.
Well, the other one, I think you would have had enough fields down below, you wouldn't have purchased them, you would have had 3 fields down below that would have made up for the space, we would have had to grade them, level them.
Right,
you know,
but still
curve
money
them. So, yeah, money, just you have to purchase, but you have to do the work to get them ready.
Just trying to think down the road, right, because we're trying to pitch this as like, we're looking at this for the long haul. The downside of option C is it's not extensible, meaning
Mhm.
if we had to add on in the future, we're toast.
Well,
The other one had
Let's
that,
talk about
the
that.
other
I
one had
asked
that
that question.
flexibility.
I asked that
Let's talk
question.
about that,
Okay.
yeah.
Ingrid, where would we expand if we had to?
We can add in the back here, we can actually add a space here, this area here. The media area, we can add in here. And we can go through this and even add in a few more preschool. I'm assuming preschool is gonna flip with this, so this will be our preschool wing here, so it's close to the front of the building. So there are areas, and we could plan it so that that could be a future corridor for another wing.
That was my exact question, Brian.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like, how do we make the best investment for the town for a long term? And if we don't have flexibility to add on to this in the future, the town's not gonna shrink most likely. We just gotta be prepared for what that long-term vision is.
In towns of schools get students.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Ready for the middle school?
Yes, we are.
So, all the stakeholders as well as the leadership team spent quite a bit of time over these last several weeks getting together. We've heard from every teacher, every educator, every facilities person, every stakeholder in the building to really carefully examine the programmatic requirements of this building. And there's been quite a bit of adjustment to sort of right-size the program since last year, and examine carefully what was really needed versus what was a wish item or a want item. We've also were charged to stay within the existing footprint of the building as much as possible. So you might notice that this layout that you're looking at that's proposed looks a lot like the existing building, and that's because for the most part it is. With the small exception of an addition at the entrance, everything else is within the existing envelope of the building. So we're quite pleased with that accomplishment because it wasn't an easy task, and it was definitely a team effort to make sure that we could get the whole program in there. what this, just to orient you guys a little bit. So your existing entrance is right here presently. These dashed lines signify the existing vestibule entrance and the overhang outside of that. And then this is an addition necessitated by all the other programmatic pressures on the building.
We are also looking at, from our last meeting, shrinking and kind of pulling that back in to utilize more of that stage storage area, because there's a lot of unused space right there to build less new square footage.
Right.
My feedback was try to get rid of an addition, try to use the existing if at all possible. So it may not be, but that was our thought was in additions, and especially because it's for admin space. It's not like it's for special education space or classroom space. It's not a good, it doesn't have a good feel to it. So if at all possible, our suggestion was find a way to shrink it. So,
But having the admin space up front does provide a measure of security that we don't
100%.
currently have.
correct. Yep, sorry.
But that doesn't mean that you couldn't build an addition that provides services other than admin and move admin somewhere else or encroach upon another
Because if
existing
you wanted
space.
strictly based on PR purposes, yeah, we could do that.
It still might be the right thing to do though, right?
Well, it's certainly an optics issue that we recognize. We also felt, looking at the building, that there were some serious security issues in regards to not having the administration directly adjacent to your entrance. Also, the entrance itself is configured in such a way that it could use a lot of improvement so that people aren't entering the building before they're vetted by the administration. Right now, once somebody gets into the lobby, they pretty much have access to the building once they go through the vestibule doors. So this,
Our story,
Yeah,
right? I
that's
mean,
all.
if you sell the town the fact that we have an easy entry point or a potential security concern at our entry, we have to reconfigure that space to provide the safety for the students. Like, to me, that's the very sellable point.
We've
And
talked
it's the
about-
truth.
But it's also a point where they say, well, that'll cost $300,000 to build, so just build a new entrance for it too. So to this project, it's a selling point to it, but it's also one of those, well, just fix the stupid entrance and, fix it now.
And from a Sohegan 2.0 perspective, we suggested that, and I think that went through for this year. Yeah, so that concept of like, yes, we need it, and I agree, and I think all of JFAC has already weighed in on like, yes, secure our entrances. But the cost on that budget versus the cost on this is obviously different.
Well, I mean, I guess and this is not a question for tonight because this is further down the road, but how much does this blow the whole thing out of the water? Is it
Is it $1 million or 200,000?
exactly?
Yeah.
Right.
well, I think, it's going to be important also, obviously, we're going to look into the alternatives to minimize or eliminate an entrance to whatever degree is possible. But also, I think it's going to be important to educate everyone that it's really not about building administration space. It's really the pressures that are put on the building by right-sizing the educational spaces in the remainder of the building, and those pressures impacting on the administration. And the getting the secure entrance and making the room by pushing the administration, making the room for the rest of the educational program and the rest of the building is really the driver. But I do understand the optics, and we will need to go back and look at this again to see how we can improve on it.
And I just want to note too, we did quickly look, because when I first came to the site, the parking lot's way over here, and really your entry should be here as you enter the site. But the distance here and the fact that you would need a hallway didn't really lend itself to a compact entry, whereas this area here, right now, it's kind of like on the side and down this area. So bringing it out, I think, creates a nicer entry. It's more identifiable because it really comes out and beckons to you at the road.
It also brings you into more public areas. It's a more natural fit coming into this area on the building, where you can have a strong connection with the Learning Commons library, as well as with the performance area of the cafetorium, as opposed to entrance over here, which is sort of this area and this area are both sort of the service sides of the building, where you've got your kitchen delivery, et cetera, your boiler rooms over here. Pretty static elements that are hard to move and expensive to move. So it's something that we have to consider and keep in mind as we go. But as a bigger picture to this plan, what essentially we've done here is minimize the impacts of construction to the cafeteria wing, the gymnasium wing, and to the 100 block or I believe it's a 91 edition. And the entire plan has a minimum impact on structure in general. We were very careful on this layout. There's a lot of walls moving around, but we tried very hard not to move the structure around.
Well, in the 100 wing too, we're reusing a lot of the walls that are there.
We are.
So versus just gutting it, because when you walk through that area, it's in pretty good shape.
So to help you understand that, or at least appreciate what we're talking about here, all the gray walls are existing walls to remain, and then the white walls would be new walls. I think that helps a little bit when you're looking at a plan like this. So as you enter the building, right now with this addition, there's this secure entrance. You come in, check in with the administration, go out this way. It takes you into the main circulation space of the building, or the hub of the building. We were envisioning a considerable renovation to the library that would open this up and make it sort of a wayfinding point for the overall building, and really open up the whole concept of learning commons and project-based learning spaces to the rest of the general population. Right now, you walk in and you look at a big concrete wall. This kind of turns its back on the rest of the building. We've also kept the nurses area centralized to this building. Gymnasium, as I mentioned, is still over here, as is the cafeteria where it is now. The creative arts wing has been adjusted quite a bit. There's been a lot of discussion about the music and how presently it's way over here in the 100 block. The sound is disturbing a lot of the instruction that's going on across the hall. And so what we did was we right-sized the music and moved it down into this one-story wing, where it's got better acoustic isolation, but also we can get a properly sized space inside the existing envelope. And directly adjacent to that are other creative arts, like the 2D and 3D art room, the computer programming and design room, the associated innovation lab and its auxiliary spaces, as well as a instrumental music or music theory classroom. Over on the left-hand side here, what you see are essentially 3 distinct pods of classes. What we tried to do and accomplished here is to have 2 pods for each of the 3 grades, and integrate the science teachers in with the math and humanities teachers, so that each subject is in a pod, is together in the pod. So what we envision, just looking at this plan, is this pod here, with its science, math, and humanities, would be 6th grade, as would this one on this side of the same floor. And then directly above that, it's the exact same configuration, but for 7th grade. And then the 3rd pod would be the 8th grade, which would be broken up into 2 floors. So you have your humanities, math, science over here, and then on the floor above, same thing. What you see in the light green are your special education spaces. This is the life skills area, the occupational therapy, math intervention. CM is a case manager for special education. So we have the case manager, school psychologist, guidance, et cetera, embedded with the general population of the school and sprinkled throughout. They didn't really want to have them in our own special wing per se, but instead have them actually among the general population of all the students. Family Consumer Science on the second floor has been moved up from what was the Creative Arts wing and also right-sized to be able to handle an additional kitchen, which they felt that was necessary. This here is the upper level of the Learning Commons. So as you look at this plan, you come into the Learning Commons area, and we move to the 2 stairs on each side to a central stair with a landing that can open up to either one of 2 flexible classrooms. One would be used for a laptop lab as well as a flex class. And then the pre-core math isn't a full-time need, so that would also be a flexible classroom space. And we were envisioning a glass frontage here, so you can look down into this major space, and these could be used for classroom project learning. We could also put in a movable partition here that has strong acoustical value, so that we could either have 1 classroom or a combined 2 classroom assembly. So overall, big picture, I think some of the positive we need to talk about with this plan is the majority of the program that was identified over those several weeks with the teachers and administration are inside of this existing building. We've achieved getting 6 pods with the 3 grades and having the integrated subjects. The science labs are now with those pods. The support spaces with the case managers and copy rooms and guidance and interventionists are all integrated into the rest of the classrooms. We squared off a lot of the classrooms. You have presently a lot of triangular classrooms and not very efficient square footage. They're tough to teach in, and we've squared a lot of them off. We've got the music in a much more agreeable location for after-hours use, as well as easy access to the stage. The innovation lab is going to be able to take advantage of tall ceilings and have a close connection with the computer programming and the art, so we could really reinforce that STEAM project learning concept. And we have some breakout spaces that were asked for around the building. The breakout spaces are used for individual and small group learning spaces that aren't necessarily disturbing a classroom, but it's big enough to have 4 to 6 students working together with a window off the corridor so they can be monitored by the teachers. We actually have 1 extra in this layout, which we were really happy to be able to provide. That gives you some flexibility also in the future for special services in case it's an expansion here or there. We've also planned for student display throughout the building, so we can show student projects along the main corridors, off the Learning Commons, along the main entrance. The high visibility into the Learning Commons we talked about before. And we've got foreign language, health, 8th grade classrooms, all within the 100 block. And we're keeping a lot of the existing walls and structure in place with minimal reconfiguration in a lot of areas of the building. So that's going to be a significant money saver. On the disadvantages side for this option, we've talked first and foremost about the addition. So obviously we have some work to do there. The rooms, there's only a couple of rooms that were in the program that are not in this plan. One is a school suspension room, which was requested in the administration wing, but they felt that they could double up a small conference room for that use, and that's what's happened here. On the wish list was a multi-purpose workout room for things like yoga and so forth, and that was also not provided because an addition would be necessary for the building. I mean, essentially, we packed out the existing building, so any additional program that would be wanted for this building, we have to sort of look at things and say, okay, what would we really want to pull out of the program in order to satisfy that? Other disadvantages, as well as we did in squaring off the classrooms, we still have some irregular shapes in 4 of the science classrooms. The front entrance addition really blocks off some windows for 2 of the science classrooms. We were thinking about some solar tubes or skylights for those. But as we continue to look at that entrance, we can adjust that. We had to make some compromises with the My Time calming rooms and their configuration, but the principals seemed to think that they were very reasonable compromises to the whole thing. We've listed every itsy bitsy little change of the square footage from any deviation from the program to the plan, because we really wanted to be very clear as to what spaces in the building might be smaller than the program that was listed. And so on the right side here, you see every single one, and we've reviewed those with the principal, and really there wasn't any concerns about any of them. I think the one item that we really need to loop back on is the Learning Commons, because the amount of linear footage of books that are being asked for is putting a lot of pressure on the other spaces inside the library for things like group learning, for small team projects, and the soft seating. So once we get a little deeper dive into that, we may find that pressure is alleviated and things will come up right.
And so just to clarify, when you're talking here on the comparisons to the program, you're talking about the 2020 program that LBA put together, not what we currently have, right?
They revised it.
But I just wanted to be clear that in his bulleted list here, that's what he's comparing it to. He's not saying that.
No, what I'm comparing it to is the 2021 program. So so the athletic director, it was felt this year needed 140 square feet for their office. We've provided 108.
First thing they did was.
Got it, okay.
But that's a good point. We should have a summary of the program that we had before versus where we are today, so that you guys can see the reduction.
Yeah, and we do actually have that. If you take a look at the program that was completed in June, excuse me. We actually do have a comparison of last year's program to this year's program. One of the things, though, there's a little asterisk to that statement that I think is really important, is when you look at the master plan from last year and you look at that floor plan does not satisfy the program. All of the spaces in the program were not in the plan. So, whereas this year, almost all the spaces in your program.
The revised program.
Yeah, the revised program, the 2021 program, almost all of those spaces are in the plan with the exception of those you see listed here.
Thank you.
Does this plan include a lot of the, so this is obviously a lot of infrastructure work, but what about like heating, cooling, windows, doors? 'Cause that was always my
Yeah.
biggest.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get rid of all the windows that have no seals left on them, the doors that have holes to the outside.
Well, I think you have to get rid of all the windows. All the windows have to be replaced. We're gonna have to cut some new windows in as well. But your windows are such a vintage that it's time to replace them.
That's a nice way to put it.
But this likely would include like electrical switchgear replacement, boiler plant, or at least some of the hydronic plant, right, all of that, right?
Lighting and
Yep.
everything.
Lighting, the
Everything.
ceilings, so we're gonna be lighting too.
Ceiling stains are gone because we're taking out ceilings.
They'll actually have like outlets for the teachers.
Exactly.
The exterior walls up and then doing everything inside of that.
And keeping as much interior walls as possible, but
From a flow, like a floor plan flow, I don't think it's changing at all, correct?
Yeah.
the
So wasn't
general,
it the big
It
issue
is, no.
before? Because I remember the faculty telling, like,
so the
traffic flow was a
the corridors aren't moving, correct?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
The general circulation pattern is the same. We've tightened it up a little bit. You've got a lot of wasted space in your corridors. And we were able to capitalize on some of that to satisfy some of the programmatic needs.
Do you think there's any structural issues that we will unearth? Meaning, when a structural engineer comes in, are we going to find that we have to shore up, add columns, move things?
I think on the whole, no, I don't see that. There's going to be a discussion about making sure that the walls that we put in are providing sufficient bracing for the building, because when you take walls out of the building, there's some lateral compromises that are made. But we've got a significant amount of walls in this building, and I think it's comparable to what you have now. So I'm really not worried about it.
And there was nothing that flagged me when walking through the building, we walked through every space, and there wasn't anything like, there weren't extraneous cracks in weird places or, you know, deficiencies looked obvious. And that's, and then like you said, there's a lot of, your corridor walls are already having heavier construction for fire ratings anyways, so that those mostly stay in place. We tend to use those for lateral load absorption as well.
Adam, don't you have a set of the floor plans of that building in your archives?
I'm sure I do, yes.
That would give us the steel layout and that would assist them.
My more acute question was, moving all these walls, I was really concerned that we would create structural issues.
No, we were lucky enough to get some really good information from Roger and the team about the existing buildings. So we feel like we've got a very good handle on where your existing columns are, and you know, bearing walls where they exist. So we have moved around concrete masonry walls, but we don't believe that they're bearing at all. I think we found the right balance here.
And we've also made this design and put new walls where your existing structure is.
Absolutely.
From a phasing perspective, how does it affect the flow of the school and how it operates today? Because I mean, you're moving a lot of pieces around, and you may not necessarily be able to put kids in this quarter versus that quarter based upon the way it's currently constructed.
So Ingrid, you guys are assuming that this is going to be 2 summer slammers, right? But we're not
Correct, yeah.
active construction during the school year. So the first summer, we're going to do the left half of the building. The next summer, we're going to do the right half of the building. And during that intermittent school year, 90 to 95% of the building is going to be still usable and accessible.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we get deeper into this, we're going to have to, you know, really start doing room counts, right? And make sure that we've got everything taken care of for a 5 through 8 for those 2 years.
And put on the, we moved the science labs obviously out of the other wing, and there's a lot of infrastructure for science labs. And they're kind of now inserted in the other wing. Is that going to be a substantial cost factor? Like, you know, they need plumbing, they need ventilation, they need, you know, all those services that are not in those spaces now.
Well, I think that you know, there's a lot of need for that infrastructure renovation anyway. And you're going to have plumbing and HVAC and so forth in those areas regardless. So, you know, there is a cost to moving services, but I don't think that's a significant impact to the overall budget now.
Is science the best subject to have in one of the oddly shaped rooms? Because has that been discussed?
That was my question.
Yeah, so that's a great point. What we looked at here was we really tried to get the largest classrooms in the odd-shaped rooms because they give the best flexibility to doing something just like this.
Sure.
What we see is probably having
It's a really big.
so you probably have your lab stations over here, and then your general instruction in this area with your teacher wall probably here.
It's a map. Is that, Brad, is that 1470 square feet?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
So
Yeah,
That
your state minimum for this number of students, I believe, is 1440.
And you don't have prep rooms, so the prep is in the science rooms themselves.
Right.
So visually, can I just ask a question visually? If, and I don't know, if Brian or Adam, if one of you wants us to stand up there and like point to what I'm talking about, but where we're looking at that science room on the bottom. Yep. So where would a regular classroom be right now? Like to try to figure out how much science, how big that classroom is?
Yeah,
Basically-
I could bring an existing classroom up on the screen if you'd like.
Yeah, so if you move, where it says math, if you moved that wall angled,
Yep.
it would
So
kind
basically,
of
if you just cut
bisect.
those two, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so it's giving science like another corner, another usable, regular space type of corner in a room.
So like a Wilkins classroom is like 900 square feet to give you a frame of reference.
Okay.
So it's 1.5 of those.
Okay, which is probably close to right sizing it when we talk about the useful space of a classroom. Okay,
Some of those science classrooms currently have a separate prep space, right? So now they don't have that, so they need to be bigger, right? So that they can.
It can also be added in. I mean, you could also lop off a part
This
of
is
it.
what I
to make it-
Yeah.
Yeah.
See how it,
thank you, Brad. Or Ingrid,
that
whoever
wall
was-
was moved.
Yeah, so that was, okay,
My concern is just you get triangle, you get corners in these rooms and they're not, especially for science, it seems very non-conducive. Yet one of the ones in that same floor, the science room is just a big square. It's almost 1,500 square feet. It's just a perfect square,
Mhm.
or rectangle, I should say.
Yeah, it's a tough thing for sure. And the smaller the rooms get, the more impactful the irregular shape is. Additionally, one has to think about the levels. So if you look at, give me a sec here. Can you see this new plan?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you can see your stair right here. So this science room, all this blue is on the level of this corridor. But from this point over, it is not. This is a half a story down. So if this room were this big, it would be landlocked. You couldn't get to it because you can't get to it from the corridor in this direction. It's a three-dimensional puzzle for sure.
Ridiculous.
Mhm.
I'm guessing it was in the 70s.
So where
when
would the
open
science
concept was-
prep area be then?
Open concept was all the rage back then.
So
Could
that's
you,
our next step, is to sit down and kind of plan out. I think this plan basically shows we have all of the program for the most part here, so we have all the pieces, so we have the costs covered. And whether or not that science room ends up there, or if we.
Well, it's one of the great things about your principal here is that she used to be a science teacher.
Yeah.
And you guys have these great science prep rooms now. And in dialoguing through them, they said they really didn't need them, and that they should really be doing the science prep in the classrooms. So they have a central science storage room, which is used for certain refrigerated items and a few items that have to go into a fire cabinet. But it's a very small storage space, and they said the rest of it really would fit in the room this size, and they could do the science prep in the room.
I see that pinnacle of the triangle being more shelving and storage and
Yeah, absolutely.
open things for the teacher. Maybe the teacher's desk is back there somehow. But that's our next step, is now that we kind of have the big pieces settling, is we kind of go into the more detail of the casework.
Well, and the truth is that we're not, I don't think we're really counting on this little corner. I mean, this 1470, I think it's 1476, is about 36 square feet over the minimum that you need per the state standard. So this little corner here isn't make or breaking your layout. It's really about what goes in here and making sure it's not pinched.
Sense.
Laura?
So are you committing to 4 teacher teams? You have 2 teams per grade for the 3 grades. And how many students can you accommodate in those classrooms for the minimum square footage for 1 teacher team? What are we looking for our population of schools?
The stories, right, that we're looking at. So like sixth grade is top and bottom, so it would still be two teams that we have, like we have.
It's like how we have it for seventh and eighth, we would extend it to sixth.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, right now, your grades are scattered all over the building. You know, seventh grade is over here and over here. So with this layout, you could either stack the grade pods, or you could have them on the same floor, so they don't have to go up and down stairs. It's really however you would prefer it. When I looked at this, I thought you would probably want the lower grades to be on the same levels, so that, you know, you've got your sixth grade on your lower level, your seventh grade on your upper level, and then your eighth grade with the older kids might be split between two levels in the 100 block. But you could split everybody amongst two levels if that's what you thought worked better.
My question is, are you having the population of how many students can be in the school? Because you're creating a 2 4-person teams per grade, and how many kids can you have on each team to satisfy the minimum square footage for the classrooms?
So, and anyone else correct me if I'm wrong, but our working assumption is we're taking a whole grade level out so that we can right-size the classrooms to fit the students that we know about today. And assume that there's a potential that the Mount Vernon sixth graders will now join the Amherst sixth graders and join that as well. So if we get an influx of, say, an increase of 30% of the kids we have today, we're having a different conversation.
Hold on one second.
Yeah,
I don't think those numbers are what we're,
Yeah, so I think, and you had jumped off the call the other day, but what we discussed was, you know, that's an unknown, that Mount Vernon piece to it.
Got it.
So this building design now, and Amy and Victoria, because you guys are both still on the call, when we looked at the enrollment projections, we're not building for something that's too big. If Mount Vernon doesn't come in, we'll still need the space with our current projection, but it makes room for that. It has room for that if they do.
If they do.
Did I summarize that correctly? Because my concern when the Mount Vernon piece was brought up was like, well, stop, pump the brakes. That's an unknown. We're gonna build for something and then it doesn't happen and they don't send their kids here. What's our enrollment projections? Does it still support this? And it does.
Got it.
But is your question as how many ebb and flow
Is it too small?
classes? Well, no.
There's no room
Single
to-
classes might
No counts.
increase. If you went from, normally it's 150 kids per class, and now it's 200.
Right.
Where do
What
they
the hell are
go?
you gonna do with all these kids since you know, pouring them in this block, and this block, where you actually may need to
Right.
squeeze into another area that you might be constricted.
We're at the numbers. Classrooms.
we do at this point too. I agree with you. It's a,
That's the problem with
Problem.
going with the existing footprint of the building and not expanding, right? Is that kind of where we are?
100% right.
But would that be like 200 students a grade or yourselves?
Roughly 200 per grade, because the enrollment projection is 579,
573.
573, so roughly 200 per grade.
So that's really close to our enrollment projections, if we have any growth.
What you're saying, if we build a new elementary school, we're gonna have more people moving in, so the logic then follows, they would stay here.
That's the goal.
And then what do we do?
Reconvene, no.
No, that's actually
I mean,
a fair
You
point,
know, like,
because the expansion options are in two places. It's either off of this building or off of the new elementary building. We're intentionally building it expandable. So Ingrid and Brad, just off the top of your heads without any preparation at all, which is unfair, if we had to add a classroom wing to this site, is that possible?
Yes. You could easily
Right
flow
here.
through that storage copy with a corridor and add more classrooms. The end of the hall, right?
Right here is the most logical place, just, being familiar with the site to the degree I am, you've got a 2-story option right here.
So to Laura's point, I think it's important that we core the building, that we have conversations as we go down this path of design. If we're gonna replace the boiler plant, if we're going to upsize the Pennachuck incoming water, if we're going to, anything that can affect the core, I think we need to prepare for a potential of 30% expansion at some point. Right?
Okay.
The first one that the Valley sent over had that fourth, if you look at that as a quad,
Like a fourth
resizing,
pod.
they had added a fourth in there as part of it. It was either a new school or it was an addition as opposed to just these small.
Yep.
Admin office, so it was drawn in there before at some point, we've seen that.
And Mont Vernon has 2 classrooms per grade?
Yes.
But you can see where
25
the,
to 30 kids.
the 100 wing is, so you could mirror that up
Well,
on the
enough
page
that we
there,
don't
and
want
then
them-
it pretty much matches in perfectly.
We get up to 27, even though we're trying
But
to. write
we're,
something.
how, but as a committee, how do we say, you know, we want 30 million for now, and then in 5 years, oh snap, now we need another.
But
40
that's,
million
that's
for
driven by
hard
population
It's not our
growth, though.
snap. I think that the answer is, we're going to build for the population to know about, but also be mindful that the population can increase, and so we're gonna build in our plans for how we do that.
Okay.
So it's not a surprise, it doesn't catch us off guard, but we're
I mean,
also,
it's
we're also not
another
gonna build it now.
It is
That is
another
another
ask,
ask.
that's the
It's
thing.
another ask, but
I
your
mean-
tax base is gonna change, because you're gonna have more people in town paying property taxes, property values will go up, so.
It is, but it's
Okay,
also.
but
I
it's
think
justified at that point, right? Like right now, it's hard to justify what, you know.
Or it's harder to justify saying we're gonna build it now, even though we don't need it yet.
Exactly, that's a
Right.
good point.
But
It's
I
harder
think
to
it's,
sell, I think.
I
Yeah.
think it's important
But
for
to
us
have
to
it
keep.
baked in that there's, but to look at the expansion potential and to plan for that potential later.
I think it's gonna be important for us, though, when we make a decision, if Mont Vernon were to come to us in 2 years and say, okay, we're ready. It's gonna be important for us as a town not to turn it around and say, okay, we're gonna take Mont Vernon because this makes sense, and SAU 39. And then all of a sudden you've got bigger classes and
Agreed.
things like that. I think that's. It's a hard sell because we're talking about the money and we're talking about the residents in town who don't wanna foot the bill for something that we don't need. But at the same time, if there is like, if we're on a seesaw and we're teetering towards thinking that Mont Vernon is going to wanna come to the building, I do think it's an important point to bring up and make sure that there's no, in the future, that we're not being resentful for the decision or for the kids that are from Mont Vernon or whatever it is, because you don't wanna create a divide where you're trying to not have.
Excuse my ignorance, but if we were to have Mont Vernon tuition in 6th grade, is that put to vote, or is that? So the town has to vote for that, so the town is choosing to,
Both
the
towns.
towns that are choosing to bring Mont Vernon here, that's a town choice, not an administration choice. Administration made the recommendation, and the town has to vote to approve it.
So the board chooses to put it on the ballot?
We would have to, it just got approved, yeah.
Correct.
I should have known that, sorry. It got approved in a 5-year tuition agreement that starts this coming school year. So, I mean, we're not talking, I would imagine this wouldn't happen for at least 3 to 4 years. Probably it would be a new agreement that we would have to do at the end of this 5-year term. So we're at least 5 years away from that happening, I would imagine. And not to, and just to get it out there, there's a chance that then they say, yeah, we don't want to do it because tuition's so high. We want to just build our own addition to our school and do K through 8 up there.
So-
I mean, it's not a
To
guarantee.
be clear, my job is just to advise you all that, like, if the Amherst 5th graders leave AMS, the Mont Vernon families in general have wanted to get their 6th grade out of there. They think it's one too many years of that school. There's gonna be a natural pressure to say, why don't the Mont Vernon 6th graders come down? That's all. But it's a political decision between the 2 boards and the 2 towns, whether that actually happens.
But again, that's minimum for, it's a year before we can break ground. It's
Correct.
like- And then 2 years to build it, so you're looking at, they're already at that point, they're in your 4th year of that 5-year agreement, so we can always just say, we're gonna wait till the end of 5 years and make that part of the new thing at the earliest we can do it. So-
But I think if you design a plan that's extensible, that if population changes in town, and student rates change, and if we make this a point of, like a topic point that's discussed, and every year we review population growth, we review student enrollment, we look at projections, we start to, track where that's going, so you're forecasting out to the community, there is growth coming, it's gonna require, space for students, and if we've got at least 5 years out before the next contract comes up, like, you're forecasting out for what's going to happen. They have to vote to approve it, but you're communicating what's needed.
I have a hard time. thinking that I don't wanna-
John, yeah.
I just say.
Okay, hey guys, yeah, so I'm gonna put a pause on everyone real quick. We're at 7:40,
Knowing the population there.
No, different terms.
and I want to be respectful of Brad and Ingrid on the call. Do we have any more questions about the AMS where we are with this for Brad and Ingrid tonight, because we're a little bit over our time.
It's 24 rooms, I think the cafeteria is undersized. Very nice. I'm looking at else.
That's a little small.
Yeah, the parking fits. Every time I'm getting there as a parent, it'd be like, it's claustrophobic.
But it doesn't make a difference if you're doing one less grade or is that?
Yeah, we're reducing the number of students that are.
No, because the
No.
seventh grade all has lunch together, the eighth grade all has lunch together.
Yeah.
Less lunch as opposed to.
And you're
less-
saying there's currently 24 classrooms? Or there's,
Yeah,
or in
that's
the plan, and the plan is 24, okay.
I want to make two comments while they're still on. So first, I have to say I've done a lot of these types of plans. This is exceptional work on their part. They did a much better job than the last people we had, fitting everything into our program, the building. And second, I think a huge selling point to this is the things that don't fit. Like this is being very clear that this is not even perfect, that there are compromises being made to make this work. Which I think shows we're not trying to be exorbitant. And that is one of the reasons why I'm pushing them to get the darn addition out, because I think we just have to do our best to.
Right.
And show that compromise, so I'm trying to say good job.
Yeah, just add the timeframe that they had to pull this off was extremely tight,
Yeah.
so. Big kudos and thanks to Van Wert for that.
Thank you.
And I can say what I heard from at school, the teachers appreciated, even though like just being able to go in and have like, okay, all science teachers, your time is now to be able, they felt like they were really a part of the process and were happy that they were able to give input about what they really wanted and thought it should look like. So thank you for that time, for that too.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. And that, I actually did have a question going back to Clark Wilkins between the two options. I was just curious if you guys had a sense, Brad and Ingrid, of what the faculty and staff were feeling between those two options.
We actually didn't show the faculty and staff the two options.
Okay.
We actually were there listening about their needs, what would make their jobs easier to do and better for the kids. So that would be the next step, is we would come down and show the staff and faculty these options.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for all the great comments. We'll do up meeting notes and continue on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
As we do the EMS project, I'm wondering, whoever we talk to, we have to talk to, if that back corner that we know there's potential, if they can start to do some of that work there, whether it's grading it or whether it's knocking trees out, while we're doing all the other work that's there now. And then putting, piping and then shut offs there, getting stuff that's really lays, just have all the equipment and everything there.
It can be part of the site design as well. doing all
Yeah,
that.
and then because if you don't use it, you don't use it. If you need it, you don't have to worry about. big
Well, yeah.
jumping.
Like I said, it kind of makes sense that you have the kind of conceptual plan, like if we're doing the same wing as the 100 wing there, we look at how are we gonna extend over, like we're doing major plumbing work and that kind of stuff. Getting that infrastructure over there is easy while we're building and we get the other building done at that. Let's plan to have the pipes extended, cap them off, put the valves there.
And run the 3-inch pipe, not the 2-inch pipe that has to be replaced all the way back to the main, right?
A little upsize won't be a big deal, but we can estimate that, because we'll see what we're gonna need for that 100 wing anyways. We say, okay, we're gonna do the same size HVAC in that section, we can mirror that whole thing, so it should be working just fine. And with the way systems work now, the scalability is pretty good. We can even upsize certain motors and that, and have them run at lower speeds currently and still be energy efficient, and then when we need them, we can ramp them up with very little impact on infrastructure. Very smart.
So I just had a quick question, and I asked about this in one of the subcommittee meetings. Do these plans include air conditioning for these buildings?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We asked
Well-
about the whole HVAC. I asked them that specifically. to
No,
include it all in.
Right, but what Lisa's asking is like central air, and I think I don't know the,
So the
That's
answer is it's not defined yet.
right.
It could include dehumidification, or it could include just what we have today. It's not yet been determined.
I think that there isn't a plant space for it right now, but we can also put,
Chillers.
for you, we put outdoor equipment, we can run chilled waters in the building, we've got all kinds of options. And then, I mean, talking to my kids who were in the school, they were like, well, wasn't that much?
Oh.
And
You
they-
know why? Because your sixth grader was in the air conditioned wing. That's why your
Maybe
kid's
that's what it
like,
was.
how hot is that? Because he was in the new wing that has cooled air. That's why. Talk to an eighth grader and they're gonna be like, it was hotter than sin. up
No, my
there.
kid lost 10 pounds.
Yeah, no, something.
I will say this, so if we continue with our strategy of having the major project and then a secondary article that's for energy efficiency upgrades, one of those will certainly be, or most likely, I would imagine, would be closed loop geothermal systems, in which case you get free air conditioning. Right, so the consideration would be, in my opinion, build energy efficiency upgrades with geothermal for heat, and then you have literally, I mean, you just have to run the pumps to get air conditioning. It's super cheap. Once you make the initial investment. That would be
And we
my
might,
guess.
we might work out that we do that, that infrastructure, that, where that new footprint's gonna be, we can drill the wells down over there. Part of our site prep and call it a day.
But that changes, like, that changes the upfront cost of the project, so then it becomes a question, right?
That's why, again, the strategy is put a second.
Right, no, yeah.
100% changes the
I was
upfront
just
cost.
kind of articulating that would be a value proposition for the community.
That's right.
But like, to Lisa's question and to Brian's point, what would our base package look like? Like, what are we doing that's going to improve the airflow in the buildings from what it is today? Because it's awful.
Well, so we're certainly doing what would be considered a significant renovation to the existing building, which means we're no longer grandfathered into old standards. So our CFM requirements for fresh air are now going to have to meet new building requirements, which compared to 1972 are like, I don't know, a 20-fold increase.
They increased it even over the last like 5 years, it went up a
It's-
lot.
There's an unbelievable amount of airflow that has to happen in new building code. So we're going to have to be subject to that no matter what we do, because this is a significant.
I think more are coming, you're gonna see it's gonna go up again.
And just changing the windows alone would have a tremendous impact on, moderating the temperature. I think that creates so much air or lack of airflow and just radiant heat. It's not good. But if we went geothermal too, like that's a long-term cost savings. Just the energy efficiency that you gain from that. You're not spending money on heating and cooling.
Yeah.
I think that time is it's not horrible, when you can look at that too, you do a whole life cycle analysis, say, listen, we're gonna invest this money now, and in 20 years, we're gonna.
Net zero.
Yes. I would like to hear from, I would like to hear from other schools that use that, because I know some homeowners that have geothermal and they hate it.
Well,
So,
Was it Wolfboro?
I will
right?
say this,
It's gotta be-
if it's open loop wells and they're just doing it with heat pumps, then 100%, we're not talking about that. So the closed loop system is, it still works as a heat pump, but has a secondary boiler associated with it to make sure your hot water can get hot enough. But on the air conditioning side, because it's a closed loop, it's massively efficient compared to a home system. But what did I miss? Because you know more than I do.
No, well, then you're on the right track, I mean, they have to be right sized. There's been a lot of undersized systems, like they didn't drill the wells deep enough, they didn't make the loops big enough. It's gotta be right sized,
okay,
that's where people fall apart.
okay.
And we're talking about those type of upgrades being like extra warrant articles that we put forth to the town? Is
That was a
that-
conversation a while ago that we would bundle all of those, because anytime in my experience, anytime you build a school, there's this give and take between the upfront cost and the operating costs. And 9 times out of 10, what school districts do is they get stuck. They say, we're going to lower our upfront cost. They put in unit ventilators and VCT everywhere and no insulation and junk, and then wonder why their operating costs are terrible. So in my opinion, the better thing to do is say, this is the base building that we're going to approve. All of the energy efficiency upgrades, whether they're closed loop, geothermal, you want to put solar panels, you want to increase the insulation to a value that approaches the LEED standards, whatever you want to do, put that separate so the town can vote on that separately, decide separately, and understand separately that your operating costs are going to be impacted by this article as well. It removes the drama from the main article, because what people argue about all the time is the overall cost of the main article. And if you increase it with the energy efficiency upgrades altogether, someone's going to get up at deliberative session and say, I could build this building for $5 million cheaper, to which the answer is yes, you can. Yes, you can, but you will spend $10 million more operating costs over the life of the building.
So you're saying let the town vote separately on kind of the lifestyle of the,
That's my thought. It's up to, it's clearly not my decision, but that's my,
I think you're thinking you're totally on the right track. We want, and there's grants available, there's energy efficiency improvements, Eversource is providing them, you can get things out of, gas utilities are providing them right now. There's lots of available, so we should be looking at those options.
Oyster River has done a lot of those different options on their build that they're currently going on now.
Laura,
Thank you. The music and chorus rooms, there are 2 separate rooms now. Are they combined in this?
yeah, they are.
So the use of that space, there's only so many periods in a day.
Again, you don't have the 5th grade, and so, and I may butcher this, so someone help me out, but if I understood what was explained to me with 5th grade music is very, okay, I'm messing this up, it becomes, as the grades go up, the way that they instruct is different,
it's more rudimentary for 5th grade level.
so they need more space.
But there's like some space throughout here that you might be able to use for an overflow or.
So there's that other music.
The music theory
classroom
room,
across the hallway from it.
Yeah, there's one space I don't even want to use in the interior of the building, and start to get noise spill over at that point.
yeah, but the question still is, if you have 7th graders on specials, and I mean, unless you're gonna change the whole schedule, you're gonna have 2 groups of 7th graders, one taking band and one taking music. And if they're supposed to be sharing the space, they can.
Right.
So unless you're figuring out, unless you're gonna change the complete, like some kids, some 7th graders are gonna take specials this time and some others are gonna do others, and that's fine. And that's up to Bethany to decide, or, whatever. But if you're going to keep things similar to the way they are now, you can't do with that design.
Am I missing something, or don't they have the one room, but also the music theory room at the same time? Doesn't that cover it?
But that music theory room looked very small, so are you gonna put 30
Well, Bethany
kids in there to
answered the question,
sing?
she was confident.
Yeah.
We had a
And I-
lot of conversation about this,
Yeah.
and she felt that she could work with what we had in place. So,
I mean, it just may be a change of how it's scheduled out, that's
yeah,
all.
but to your point, so you're right, it was definitely a topic of conversation. We asked her multiple times, and she felt confident that she could work with the space.
I think it was also mentioned.
And
using
it's closer to the stage, yeah,
at some
thank you.
point.
that
Yeah.
just,
Oh, good point.
They could use
Right.
the stage in some small capacity, like especially in the morning or the afternoon, like when they're not using the cafeteria.
If we were Phillips Exeter, we'd be building a bigger building. I mean, we're making compromises to make this work. There's no doubt about that. This is not a pie in the sky Taj Mahal version. It's not. It just isn't. It
The
just
other
isn't.
idea was that some of the music lessons would be happening at the 5th grade level, so that when they got to 6th grade, it would be sort of
Less.
larger ensemble
Mhm.
band, so using the stage as well, so.
Thank you all. Yes,
Madam Chair, other business.
other, are you asking or you have other? business?
I have other business.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have not, as yet, met with the historic commission or even the planning board, because they're still having issues. They won't even let me on the agenda for now. So I think it will be a formal meeting now,
Okay.
and I'll let you know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, thank you. And if you need support, like what we can provide to help you with that.
And John, apparently your emails have been going to Toronto.
I know, he knows. I emailed Sally directly.
I have,
Sally.
apparently, I have a relative in Canada I do not know about.
Yes.
Because there's not many Baptists in this country, I'll tell you that.
I know, I loved
Our
that.
emails had to pay the toll, which is frustrating.
You did?
Well, our next meeting is on August 12th. Here.
When?
Yeah, August 12th. At 6 o'clock. We don't have any 2.0 updates this time. I did touch base with Stephanie, and they're reading on a few things, so perhaps at our August meeting. And there were board updates as needed on the agenda for tonight, but I don't think you all have anything.
So the next ASB meeting is next week. Yeah, and so. Yes, next week, right? And so I will give, there's a facilities, moment in that agenda, so I will give some updates regarding that.
And then you're presenting also at the board. of
At the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday night, so that's Monday night, and then ASB is Wednesday night.
Yeah, we have a 10-minute window to talk about the building projects overall, so.
Yeah, it's not a presentation, it's like a.
I'm sorry, yeah,
touch base.
an update.
Yeah, same with Board of Selectmen, it's like an introduction and here's where we're at, and we're still working.
Great. Well, are there any other questions? Awesome. Lisa, thank you for taking the minutes.
Yeah,
It's
you say that.
7:55.
You haven't seen me yet.
Meeting adjourned.